As states begin to reopen, there are many questions both business owners and consumers are asking. Just because a movie theater or a restaurant is open, it doesn't mean that you're going to go to it, does it? Well, what will it take for you to go post-COVID-19 mindset?
Well, our next two guests partnered on a new survey to find out what it will take to get Americans to re-engage. They found the 4 questions that most executives want to know are: when will things be back to normal? How do we restore confidence so clients will return? What will the new normal look like? And what external assurances will lure customers back?
Well, to break this all down, we're going to welcome in Rich Thau, the president of Engageus, and John Last, the Sports and Leisure Group president. Their groups partnered on this Back to Normal Barometer study. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good to be here, Sean.
All right, Rich, the thing that I found fascinating looking through your study is that 1/3 of all people are ready to re-engage without hesitation. And I think that, I guess that word probably needs a little bit more definition, because I'm thinking to myself, I want to re-engage, but I am a little hesitant. So can you explain that one to me?
Sure.
Well, Sean, the fact of the matter
Rich,
is that folks who are engaging or want to engage are ones who they've been stuck in their houses for weeks, and they're tired of working out in their basements. They want to be able to go to a gym. People who've taken a cruise in the last year want to be able to get back onto a cruise ship and be able to enjoy that as opposed to being confined. So we have a large number of people who, 1/3, as you say, just over 1/3 actually, who are raring and ready to go.
Well, John, you say that a lot of people who took cruises last year, 50% of them said that they wanted to take a cruise this year coming up. But I find that fascinating because hotel visits were down. And isn't a cruise ship almost like a hotel on the water? It seems like there's a little bit of discrepancy in people that want to take cruise and people that might want to go and stay at a hotel.
plus, I mean,
John?
It's really interesting, having actually worked in the cruise industry earlier in my career. This has been an incredibly loyal group of guests. The people who are in this survey who are cruisers have cruised in the last year. They've cruised in the past. And if you think about it, we did a similar thing after 9/11. With the microscope so on top of the cruise industry, you've got to figure that if they're going back out there now, they're going to need to have their A game on.
Hey, Rich, the thing that I find fascinating here, the one thing that I think a lot of people are, is like, how do we go back to a restaurant? And the thing that I found interesting here is that about 50% say that they're ready and 50% say they won't. One of the things you guys tested was whether or not people would be willing to have their temperature taken or get swabbed going to a restaurant. The thing that's interesting to me is, how many people said yes, but then how many people said no? Because I'm thinking to myself, I don't mind going and seeing the social distancing stuff, but I'm not sure I want someone from a restaurant taking my temperature and doing this. And so when you look at that, don't you find, I just thought it was a really fascinating how many people are ready to get back out so quickly that they're willing to let some random person at a restaurant test them and maybe give them a nasal swab.
So it's interesting you ask about it that way, Sean, because the fact of the matter is, people in our qualitative research, we also did some in-depth interviews in addition to the polling, there was a much higher level of receptivity to the temperature taking than there was to the swabbing. And there was some concern about the swabbing, that it would be some non-health professional sticking a swab up somebody's nose. And that didn't appeal to people. But temperature taking, especially if you can do it without it being invasive, is something that I think more people are willing to do. And again, folks want to get their lives back to normal, and they're willing to go through some steps that are not all that pleasant to do it. But an important point, business travelers, much more willing than leisure travelers to take those steps and to endure things that a leisure traveler won't.
Can I ask you though, Rich, do you think that this changes once it actually happens? Meaning, right now, I've been cooped up for whatever, 6 weeks. I want to go sit at a restaurant with my family or my friends or whatever. The second that I go and I sit there and I have someone sticking a thermometer in front of me or whatever, or you're at a business meeting and someone's going, oh, I'm sorry, you've got 100.1, and there's a degree of embarrassment or whatever. I just wonder how much of this changes once the practical application goes into practice.
John, you want to take that?
Thanks, Rich. I think you raise an interesting point. And we have asked the question both directly in the survey work as well as in the qualitative work. And when you look at how that was broken down, there's some hedging there. There's about 20% to 30% that say, yeah, I'm willing to subject myself to that. But the rest say, I probably would. And then maybe all bets are off on that one. So I think you're right. There's probably a little bit more consideration that people are going to need to take to actually subject themselves to this.
You know, Rich, one thing I found that was interesting, one of the surveys showed that with assurances, only 57% of people wouldn't be ready until potentially August. It said 3 months. I mean, that's August. You know, we talk about some of these businesses opening, but it looks like maybe we won't see people actually going to them. Do you feel like that's accurate?
Well, the fact of the matter is that those people who want to return, who are hesitant but are willing to return with assurances, will do so in stages. So you'll see 10 or 15% within the first month, 10 or 15% within the second, 10 or 15 within the third. So I wouldn't say it's a whole bunch of people waiting until August. Some will come in June, some will come in July, some will come in August. And what's really important to keep in mind is that these people will need multiple assurances. One assurance will not be sufficient for them. They're going to need more than one.
John, that's actually a great point. John, talk to me about that. Does that mean that the restaurant has to say, here's all the precautions that we're taking, and like the local government has to say it's met some kind of criteria? Is that like the two assurances it needs, or where can these assurances come from that people are looking at? Because I look at this and I want to know that a restaurant's saying, okay, we've wiped the place down clean, the tables are this far apart, but I want to know what the restaurant's done more than some government standard that they claim to have met.
Well, you're absolutely right, Sean. I mean, there's definitely a greater weight that people are putting on the local assurances, but I think it's also important to recognize that there's about a third of the people in the survey, the assurance that they need, and one of the assurances that they need is what we define as a medical breakthrough. And that's traditionally been identified in the work as either a vaccine or having a protocol to mitigate the effects of the virus.
But hold on, because that's not, by all standards, right? We're talking, let's say, minimum 6 months, but probably a year before that happens. And so, John, this gets back to the question I was just asking. That sounds good in theory, but then that means that people are not going to go back within 3 months. It could be a lot longer because they're not going to see this vaccine out there.
And I think that's a real risk that we have to think about. Certainly, there are a number of people who have at least indicated in both the survey and the qualitative work that that's what it's going to take to get them to go back to normal. So it's kind of like a half empty, half full situation. You have, as you mentioned, there's a number of people who go back right now, but there's also a number of people that have said none of these assurances short of a vaccine or a protocol are going to bring them back. So to Rich's point and to what we've been talking about, it is going to be a very staged return, and there's going to be some fall off, at least in the short term.
Yep, that sounds about right. Rich, John, thank you so much for your insights and for your study. It's all so interesting. Really appreciate you coming on today and sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, well, up next, we'll meet a winery owner who's seeing red. She claims she's gotten no real guidance on when she can return to business. You'll hear from her next.